everybody, and welcome to The Last Hit. We are finally back. It's a new season, or it's a new split, I guess. We're here for summer 2021 with The Last Hit. This split, it's going to be myself and my boy Lyric hitting you every single episode. Lyric, how are you doing, mate? Welcome to The Last Hit. Welcome to your solid position on the crew.
I know, it's like my new dojo. It's such a weird journey. 2020, there I am. It's my dojo. 2021, I'm gone, but I'm kind of like a guest reappearing because Dagda's in quarantine. And now 2021 summer, I am back again. So, nice to be with you. I casted with you yesterday. We do this today, and I cast with you tomorrow. So it's pretty much just like endless brotherhood going on.
For context, this will come out on Tuesday, but we are recording on Sunday? I think it's Sunday.
Yeah, it's Sunday.
When you work 7 days a week, the names of the days doesn't really matter quite as much. I'm obviously wearing my England shirt because, for anyone that doesn't know, the Euro Cup is on. England is playing technically today, 3 days ago for anyone that's watching when this comes out. And Lyric showing his LPL bias with an RNG shirt, no less.
There's no better place to show it in a tournament where China's not involved. League of Legends has nothing to do with it. But guess what, baby? RNG will still find a way to win it all.
Yeah, I'd be impressed if RNG manages to win the Euro Cup. That will be truly sensational. But let's. I want to give you guys a little overview of what's going to be happening with The Last Hit over the course of this split, because obviously the goal is that we'll have 3 people on for a lot of the episodes, but what we're going to do is it's going to be me and Lyric as your stable anchors, and then we'll have some guests for different episodes. Maybe we'll have some interviews and things like that. We'll see how it goes across the course of the split. But also, everyone's favorite segment, Guess the Player, it's been axed. We've replaced it. And instead, we're going to be trying some different games at the start of each episode. Maybe we'll stick with one if it feels good. Maybe we'll change it. We're going to be flexible. We're going to have some fun. So, Lyric, we're going to begin with our first new game. Today, we're going to play some word association. So what's going to happen is I'm going to give you 3 words. I'm going to give you, every time I say a word, I want you to say the first player that comes to your mind when I say that word. So this is going to be, there's potential for this to go massively wrong. But fingers
I definitely
crossed
need to list the
will.
players up to do this.
And then that can be our clip to promote on Twitter. So the first word is aggressive.
Oh my god, this describes what teams and players doesn't this describe? Like LNG, OMG maybe?
You're just meant to
player
say
that
a
is
player.
aggressive.
Just the first player
Yeah,
that
I know
comes to your mind.
that's even worse. Okay, an aggressive player, we're gonna say Jackie Love.
I knew it would be Jackie Love. I knew it immediately. Okay, the next one, this should be actually a little bit more interesting. Intelligent.
Aggressive and intelligent. Ooh.
So this is separate. This is separate to aggressive. You don't have to have aggressive and intelligent. Just who comes to your mind
really?
when you think
Wait.
intelligent?
But
maybe that's a cool game for next time.
intelligent. That's I took from What's the Player where you give numerous hints, but an intelligent player. Holy, we are gonna go with Nuggery.
Okay. Just for context.
He lanes really intelligently.
He does. No, I'm not disagreeing. Word association is meant to be like pretty snappy. You're meant to just like give me the first thing that comes to your head rather than mulling it over. Just for context. All right, last one.
I'm still learning.
Last one, and I want you to give me like snap answer on this one. Coin flip.
The Shy.
Okay, nice. I feel like there's a lot of top laners you could throw in for that one. Honestly, a lot of players in the LPL you could have gone with. But yeah, I think the Shy, very reasonable. More tails than heads in my recent memory, at very least. So now we're going to switch it around, and I'm going to say 3 player names. And each time, I want you to give me the first word that comes to your head when I say the player's name. Okay, so the first player has recently changed his name. Elk.
Overrated. I didn't want to say it. I had to say it. I didn't want to say it.
How did you say that? He's the best player
I
in the
didn't
world.
want to say it.
Okay, he's not the best player in the world. Okay, we'll
Overrated by some.
Okay, what?
Rated fairly by most.
Okay. Who is that? Is that pointed at me? There, are you
No.
making hints? Okay, well, we'll come back to this.
Could be
We'll
possible.
talk about WE. We'll come back to this. For anyone that doesn't know, Elk is Joel. He renamed. So next player, first word that comes to mind, Naney.
Chad.
Nice. Naney, IG's new top laner for anyone who hasn't been watching week 1. Definitely worth a look in his Wukong game. Absolute banger. And finally, the last player, Yagao.
Bubble.
Bubble.
I thought of Zoe, so it's the only thing that comes to mind.
You know what? Look, I like it. I'll take that answer. I mean, I don't have a choice. I'm taking the answer whatever you say. That's the whole point of the game. But...
You know, the thing is, I actually thought that there was a right answer. I didn't know it was just a
no.
You say a player, I give a word, or vice versa. So
yeah, no,
that's why at first it started so slow. I didn't want to be wrong, but I couldn't be wrong.
Yeah.
So sorry for wasting a lot of your and the viewers' time.
No, it's okay. Honestly, the point of this game is just for a bit of banter and to glean your deepest, darkest secrets that you would usually filter on a broadcast, like the fact that you think Elk is overrated. Unbelievable. All right, so
he's having a great split so far, though.
He's having a great split so far, and we will dig into that because I have a lot to say about WE. But we'll return to that later on in the episode. I forgot to say at the start, by the way, this is available on YouTube. It's also available on Spotify. So if you want to listen while you're doing your exercise or getting the bus to work or whatever, check it out on Spotify as well. With that said, though, we're going back into well-trodden territory, going back to one of the usual segments, which is failures and faves. This is where we're going to take it in turns to talk about things that we were pleasantly surprised by this week, what we thought went really well, and also what we thought didn't really go so hot. So we'll start with our failures here. And Lyric, I'll let you go first. So what was your failure for week 1 of the LPL?
My failure definitely has to be Jackie Love. I think, when you look at top esports, it's like, sure, they play JDG, who me and you hit on broadcast. This actually might be a very favorable JDG meta with playing up towards the top half of the map, champion picks being opened up in soul lanes. But still, I don't really think that's an excuse for how poorly they played. They were getting 2v2 killed in lane against Lumao and Loken, not a very lane dominant 2v2 down there for the side of JDG. And then just continuously in teamfights, getting caught out, not even in the same vein as it was before, where it's like, okay, he's off putting a ton of damage, numerous people have died. It's like, no, in transition from bot to mid, or just walking too far forward in a team fight and getting hooked. And yeah, Jackie Love's first series, that wasn't it, Munch. That wasn't it.
Yeah, the fact that it was in that rivalry matchup as well, right? It was JDG versus Top Esports. There was like so much, like, I don't know. I felt like there was a lot of pressure to perform in that specific matchup, and then losing the 2v2 in that way. It's like one of the things that people always lean on when talking about top esports is the fact that they're going to win their lanes, right? They're going to dominate the early game and snowball. And then to get, to be honest, completely destroyed by JDG is like, I don't know. That's not necessarily an early game team. That's not a team that usually plays early game at all. So if you're losing lanes to them, I don't know. It's not a great sign for the rest of the split. I'm a little nervous about top esports at this point, but I don't know. I mean, is it too early in the episode to start talking about Mojo and whether this affects the greater picture of Mojo? I don't know.
I was just going to say, I'm never getting off the Mojo hype train, Munch. I mean, we'll see that later on in the episode, but one loss happened last split against Rogue Warriors, happened against JDG this time, but still, overall very disappointing from Jackie Love. He isn't the player that I think underperformed so heavily in a series like this so early on in the split. So, I think a very obvious failure that most people would agree with.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I fingers crossed, he just had too much of a vacation. And maybe he'll be back in form in a week or two. We'll have to wait and see. We'll go over to my failure then. My failure is BLG as a whole. I'm not going to lie. PP got away coming into this team. I was very, very excited. I was like, all right, here it is. Basically 3 of that V5 roster that was oh so beloved with Bu, Wei Wei, and PP God now all on this team. My only reservation was Zika, and I thought aiming, now he's got a better support by his side, he's going to pop off. But pretty lackluster start, realistically. They won a game against EDG. I was like, all right, here we go. This is the beginning. This is BLG just blowing their way onto the scene. Turns out they had Senna and Karma. Turns out that's just really OP.
That was just Senna Karma.
It turns out anyone that drafts that can win any game. So then EDG just trounced them for 2 games straight. And then they lose the series against LNG, and that was a much closer series. But at the same time, I have so little faith in LNG as a squad. Like, I think I'm kind of biased against them at this point, but I just, nothing about that roster gets me excited at this point. So the fact you're losing the series against LNG really doesn't fill me with any faith. I was really hyped about BLG coming into the split, but now I'm just like, I don't know. I think it's another one of these sort of jumble rosters where you've got a few players that have had really good moments in other teams and you've put them together and you're hoping that it's going to click. Maybe it will. Maybe it will later in the split.
Yep.
As of week 1, I'm not feeling it for BLG.
You know, and the thing is, it actually reminds me a lot of how BLG started last split, where it's like they've come out in 2021. They actually have really good early games, right? You can see that the team is in sync. Their laning phases overall are strong. You still have that early game synergy between PP God and Weiwei. I think Aiming's still performing. Bubu became a very solid laner last split, and it's like, okay, 2K gold lead, 3K gold lead, 4K gold lead, and then once we get into the mid game, it's just so disjointed. Like, they don't know when they should be pushing out, like, side waves in unison. We've seen them pull out a lot of, I think, like, 1-3-1 oriented comps, right? We've seen the Jace come out from Bubu. Zeka's been picking LeBlanc every game, but then someone will just get picked off, or they'll engage some sort of fight that they really have no business taking a front to back on, but they still will just all charge in. There's the one game where Bubu was playing Jace, where he's just so far out of left field on his positioning where he should be, gets picked, and it turns into a Baron for the other team. There's just a lot of moments like this. The thing for BLG is, last split when this happened, they shied away from what they were doing in the early game, and I think, like, toned it down a lot. I don't think that's the answer. I think you keep all inning on your strength. You just accept, hey, we've lost some games, we give it time. Yeah. And right, the thing is, like, you work on that weakness, because I feel like every time we see BLG find something that kind of works, but it isn't exactly there yet, they have completely abandoned it every split that me and you have been casting the LPL.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's spring 2020, man. Spring 2020, first 2 weeks before Chinese New Year, they looked amazing. They were the genius macro team. It was like, oh my god, this team's going to be amazing. They're the LCK LPL team. And then week 3 happens, and it's just a disaster. And that was maybe one of the worst splits BLG has ever had. So it is what it is. It happens. Let's move over to our favorites, though. Let's go to the positive side of things. Lyric, we'll go to you first again. What was your favorite coming out from week 1?
So this is going to be a weird one, because my favorite is actually a team that, you know, as of recording this, has now also just lost their second series. But my favorite is Ultra Prime, because this was a team that I think a lot of people looked at, they weren't excited for. But coming into LPL, this was a team I was really kind of vibing with. Mm-hmm. I really like how the pieces of the roster look on paper, where it's like, okay, we have ZS up in the top lane, he can play that weak side. We have Hacker who's going to link up with Xiaoxi, and we have Xiao Cao Bao coming in, a very, I think, flexible mid laner. He's solid in lane. Mm-hmm. He's constantly looking for roams on the map. And then, hey, SMLZ's back. You have a focal point to be that big carry. So everything looked nice on paper. Then we came into the games, and it's like, sure, they did end up losing both series, but you saw that game plan in action. They were actually able to get a lot of early game leads. You saw the mid-jungle support synergy coming in from that team, to where Xiaoxi's still making his way up towards mid and looking for a lot of aggressive action. SMLZ having some highlight games on the Aphelios, especially, where he was almost able to pull out that first series win against a team like FPX. Yeah. So sure, they might not have a win on the board just yet, but I think this is a very promising team that I didn't even rank them fighting for playoffs, and maybe they still aren't, but they look like a team now that you wouldn't really be surprised if they take a series off anyone. So I think this is a really exciting team to look out for going into the rest of the split.
Yeah, I definitely think as a team as well that, like, I can envision the world where they make it top 10. Like, playoffs is not actually that high of a bar in the LPL, with it being top 10 out of 17. You don't even have to be halfway up the standings to make it to the playoffs. So I can easily picture this team getting enough wins to make it to the top 10 at very least. We'll have to see, but SMLZ especially, very pleasant surprise. Like, I think a lot of people were very unsure how SMLZ was going to look coming back into the LPL, but I think he's had a pretty fantastic debut. We had that singular Aphelios moment, the full 200 years Moonlight Vigil, where it was the Infernum Moonlight Vigil, and everybody was stacked up, and everyone's like forgotten the mental damage this champion could do with the right weapons when you hit the ult. It was absolutely mind-blowing.
Let's remember that this happened right after FPX killed, I think, 2 or 3 members from up. So it was just him.
It was like 3v5.
Their set, and they just turn around. Like you said, he throws the Moonlight Vigil. Everyone is instantly gone. So nice on him. He's a player that was experiencing health issues last split, which is why he decided not to take any offers. So took time to rest up, came back, and I think this team is going to be a bit of a lyric barn burner going forward.
Okay, copy that. I love how you've patented a phrase that's just like such an obscure phrase that has somehow had like a redemption in specifically esports. It's like specifically esports commentators are the only people that ever say the phrase barn burner. All right, I'm gonna
use it in everyday life.
I burn barns all the time. Yeah. Normal behavior. Let's talk about my favorite here. Because I'm going to move. I'm not going to say a whole team this time. I'm just going to say an individual player. My favorite is Yagao. Because this guy has been kind of popping off in JDG's games. I'm not going to lie. Like, he has played 4 different champions. He's played Lucian, Silas, Zoe, and Jace. All 4 of which have plenty of like skill expression, plenty of agency to be able to influence the game. And boy, has he been influencing games. Him versus Knight was so much fun to watch. They weren't really 1v1ing very much, but like getting out onto the map and like seeing who could have the most impact in these crazy skirmishes. And they were both doing very well, both of them having great scorelines by the ends of the games. But Yagao had other players on the team that his hands were currently working. So
but the bubble, Munchables, the bubble.
The bubbles. There was the one fight. There was one fight in the mid-game. I said it about 7 times during the cast, but he hits like 4 bubbles in a singular fight. One of them onto Casa. Then it was onto, I forget who the next one was.
The first one over that barren wall is where it all started as well, right? The extended range, it set up absolutely everything.
And then he like uses a stolen flash to jump forwards to get a bubble onto Knight. And then the solar flare lands on Knight, so he can't get away and they just blow him up. And then he like jumps forward with the port to throw a bubble through the collapsed tower that hits onto Casa again, and they finish it. It's just like, oh my god, this is just so beautiful. But yeah, Yagao, like I think his reputation is that of a fairly quiet player, right? That kind of just does his job, bit of a role player, will tick boxes, but is never going to individually carry the game. I think it's sort of the reputation and the expectation of a lot of viewers when going into a JDG series. But I think this split so far, he's played 4 games, and every single game, he's looked pretty fantastic. So I'm really excited to see what he can do this split, and especially when having these kind of performances up against mid laners like Knight right at the start of the split, it's a fantastic look going forwards for Yagao.
My big question mark for him coming in, right, was we're hearing, okay, the mid lane champion pool is opening up a lot coming into Summer Split with the nerfs going over to Phase Rush, kind of taking away the safety that a lot of these mages did have before. And the fact that he is performing on so many different champions that we wouldn't necessarily expect, I think answers that question for Yagao and JDG overall. You still don't see much action between like Kanavi and Yagao, like no real like Kanavi coming to gank and setting up that 2v2 like we've been seeing out of someone like Rookie and Shun on IG, for example. But still, Yagao's been holding his own in both games that they played. And like you said, he's having massive impact on the map. So this is a player that, like, I feel like the perception of him really changes with the seasons type thing, right? Where when it's good series, because Yagao does seem to be a huge influence in a lot of their wins when he does get on like the Zoes, the Silases of the world, that it's like, okay, top mid laner in the LPL, has his picks where he is contending with the best of the best. Then when JDG lose, it seems like fan and community perspective really goes down to a low where it's like, okay, he had no impact at all. So, you know, but this definitely looks like a season of the community perception redemption coming in for Yagao.
I certainly hope so. I really hope so, because I feel like he's been a little quiet over the last sort of 12 months, I would say, and I hope that he gets a bit of a comeback on that one, because definitely in spring 2020, I think he was one of the One of the more highlight players on JDG. Let's move on from failures and faves. That's going to wrap that one up. Let's quickly talk about the metagame right now, because I know it's getting a bit different. Like, finally, because let's be honest, 2021, it's been pretty dry meta-wise. We've just had the Udyr Hecarim every single game. Like, the bot lanes, the mid lanes, it's all kind of in the same rinse and repeat. Pretty slow stuff. Not that exciting. Now we have Viego and Gwen both coming in, both very high priority. We have 3 different picks. I don't know if it's still true after the games today or not, but there were 3 different picks that were all 100% pick ban rate in the LPL, which were Nocturne, Renekton, and Rumble, I believe, if that's not mistaken. Yep. And then there's a whole flurry of other picks that are not quite 100% presence, but very, very close, with things like your Lee Sin. Things like Set, I think, are very, very high priority as well. So it does feel like right now teams across the LPL are still trying to figure out how they want to approach this meta. And it does feel like different teams are building different styles very early on in the split.
Yeah, and kind of a stat to go with that, right? We're only into day 7. Actually, the stats I have in front of me only cover up to day 6. We've had at least 13 champions played in each role so far. So showing a lot of variance in mid lane, that actually going way up. Yeah, we're getting a ton of different variants. Think about it. We even had the Sivir and bot lane coming out with lethality, right? We had the Kog'Maw. We're seeing people like Loken pull out the Jhin. So we're getting a ton of variants. I think a lot of this is due to, again, certain things in the mid lane, like the Phasor nerfs that we just hit on. Divine Sunder being an item that did come back, and it's not only helping champions like Ezreal, but also goes very good on things like the Wukong. We're seeing champions like Camille be able to pick that up as well. So definitely the pool being opened. Even some small buffs to other champions like Kennen, which we've had 1 game, but we've seen it banned in quite a few. It's like, hey, this is another viable champion once again. But I still feel like teams aren't quite sure of what the true S tier is. Like, Gwen has been a champion that teams have been very slowly warming up to. It actually is our most played champion in top lane as of now, to where we remember the first 2 days, almost teams were avoiding it like the plague. Viego's a champion that's kind of went the reverse, to where teams were picking it up at first, but as the games have gone on, they're seeming to want to shy away from that. Was more of a counter pick style champion regardless, because you would prefer the melee matchup. But still, yeah, I feel like teams don't really know how to feel. And I can even know that from my own experience talking to teams, of going and saying, hey, EDG, WEV5, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think is the strongest picks right now? And they're like, that's a good question.
I guess we'll
that
find
kind of
out.
says it all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the funniest things I heard about from specifically the Gwen pick you mentioned, obviously it's looked really, really good so far, right? There's been a lot of players succeeding in a big way on it. Flandre especially, I think, one of the best performances we've seen. I saw a comment on one of the Chinese forums about Gwen after Lung Xing playing it today, saying like Lung Xing is a friend of all of the Gwen mains out there, doing his very best to make sure she doesn't get nerfed. He didn't have a
Don't
he didn't
do
have a
that,
great
Munchables.
I'll move on from just flaming Lung Xing. That's not my joke. I stole that off of the forums. But one of the interesting roles for me is the AD carry position, because I feel like that's a fairly dramatic change, where we had like things like the Jinx and the Tristana were like really, really big priorities, and obviously Senna. And I think Senna will continue to be a priority. She's getting banned a ton. But things like the Ezreal coming in, it does feel like we're moving away from, hey, run an AD carry that can just hyper carry the game and focus on getting gold to them. Focus on making sure that they're getting ahead, get jungle attention down there. It feels like we're more moving towards, hey, play things like the Ezreal so you can just forego the bottom lane and play over on the other side of the map. And that's the kind of change that really interests me, because it means that the solo laners, people like Yagao that we were just talking about, have much more of an opportunity to shine in that kind of meta. And I feel like maybe this year we get way more cool picks in the mid lane. We get way more cool picks in the top side as well, where things like the Lee Sin, things like the Jace, things like the Lucian, that there is that skill expression. And we get to see some of the best top laners in the world, some of the best mid laners in the world, really kind of strut their stuff a bit on the stage.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's kind of like an aspect that one affects the other, right? The fact that Divine Sunder did get buffed. We now have Ezreal in the meta, means you can play it more up towards the top side, but at the same time, those nerfs and changes coming into mid lane, opening up a lot of different varied champions, means, hey, you have stronger mid laners coming in general, so then even champions like Varus and Jhin that bring more utility later on become higher prio, because it's like, hey, we're not playing for them to carry. But at the same time, you still do have the option with the strength of Karma Lulu right now with Kog'Maw, right? That if you ever do want to default to that bot lane style, you still can. So this is definitely the most wide open the meta's been, I feel like, in the past 2 years, which is really weird because it's like Riot hit a bunch of different areas and it just kind of happened so that every role was able to open up more as a byproduct, right? I don't necessarily know if that was Riot's intention, or that's probably always Riot's intention, but somehow with these set of changes, I feel like Riot really hit the mark.
Yeah, it feels like I mean, obviously, we're still at the very start of the split, right? So inevitably, it will close to an extent. We will see less experimentation towards the end of the split as the players figure out what they want to play. But it does feel like it's a very interesting place to be in the meta, and it's very difficult to say. Because we've even seen things like the Azir, for example, in the mid lane from Angel, which that one feels to me more like not adapting quickly enough, right? It feels like that is on the way out and its team's still trying to figure out what's going on, whereas we have other teams that are picking Sylas and Zoe every single game. Sylas and Zoe being the two most played mid laners, and then Set is there as well, which I love it. And things like Set are very popular in the mid lane, things like Renekton as well I'm a big fan of, because it completely changes the way that League of Legends is played compared to having a mage there. So I'm very excited to see what happens, and also how high priority things like the Viego and the Gwen continue to be. Whether we get any Gwen jungle coming in, or Gwen mid, or whether we get Viego in the top side. Like, I feel like there's still a lot of experimentation to be done there. Maybe even Viego Senna. I'm just saying that could be. I don't think that's actually good, but it could be. I'm just saying. But yeah, definitely going to be interesting to see how the meta continues to develop. I'm just glad there's some of those meta picks. Things like the Hecarim has gone. Udyr apparently maybe getting a rework soon. I'm not entirely sure what the timeline is on that, but fingers crossed, by Worlds, he's completely garbage, and we can just move on with our lives.
I mean, to be fair, we're not really seeing him at all anymore, right? The only build for Hecarim that really works now is if you do go full AD and full damage, but then you go in, and guess what? You're not a tanky fast boy anymore. You do pretty much just get whittled down by the enemy team so much. I feel like your dreams have pretty much already been achieved.
No. I mean for Udyr. There's an Udyr rework on the pipeline, apparently. I don't know what date that is happening, but I'm hoping that it's a terrible rework and he becomes as irrelevant as he used to be. I'm one of the few people that wasn't excited when Udyr came back in the meta.
Mean, to be fair, he's 5-10 in the LPL right now. So teams not really finding great success. It's flipped the script since MSI, where everyone was winning on Udyr, no one was winning on Rumble, to where now Rumble is doing phenomenally well. Like you were highlighted before, people figuring out, hey, put things like Set in the mid lane, give him the setup, and it works out phenomenally. So maybe even naturally over time, as you were saying, that teams might just kind of fall off the Udyr hype train bit by bit.
All right, well, unless you've got any final thoughts on the meta, then we can move on, because we've got a big segment next. And this doesn't happen very often. We decided to do something interesting where, obviously, at the start of a split, a lot of casters, a lot of players, etc., will do power rankings and try and figure out where they think each team is going to finish by the end of the split. And I thought what would be interesting is, since we're at the end of week 1, look at the power rankings that we made before the split and essentially apply week 1 overreactions to those power rankings and have the opportunity to amend the power rankings. Now, there's a couple of little things that we've got to add here before we dive into the discussion. I will go through the power rankings and explain our logic on where teams are placed. But we're going to do this on a points-based system, and we're going to have a little bet, me and Lyric. And that's that whoever had the better amended power rankings in this episode at the end of the split, and this is before playoffs, this is placement from the regular split, whoever has the better result will get to watch the other person eat insanely spicy noodles. There are these insane Korean spicy noodles in the black package. I don't know what company they are, but we had them in China, and they are mind-blowingly spicy to the point where you can't even taste anything. All it is just spice. It hurts my brain to even remember it. It's not the best at all.
I still remember my former AD carry Rain, who used to be on IG, told me, if you're not crying, it's not spicy enough, Munch. So that's the motto we're going with for this challenge.
I think maybe Rain needs to talk to someone. He might have some repressed feelings there, but Yeah, so the way the points are going to work, and this could be very interesting, is for every prediction we get correct, every correct number on the ranking, we'll get 1 point. But for every incorrect one, we get -1 point per rank that it's wrong by. So let's say I predict someone is going to be in 4th and they finish in 7th, then I get -3 points for that prediction. So there's a very real chance that we both end up in sub-zero numbers, but all that matters is who comes first. That's the important thing. So it's going to be an interesting split. We get to see someone fall into miserable pain by the end of things. So let's talk power rankings then. I'll bring them up on the screen hopefully, and we can talk through these. So Lyric, your original one. I'll let you talk through your original power rankings, and we'll do a quick overview of the power rankings and what was amended, and then we can go into the details of each thing. So I'll let you do yours first.
Yeah, so I'll kind of just run through my playoffs teams for, the audio-only listeners. That I had FPX first, RNG second, Top Esports third, IG coming in at fourth, followed by EDG, WE, JDG, Suning, RA, and BLG. The first one I always have to explain, right, is that IG prediction. And, Munch, it goes back to what we were talking about yesterday. There was a lot of hopium going into this original power ranking. I just want to believe that Rookie will finally be able to succeed. I heard that the mid lane pool was opening coming into summer. I was talking to teams about scrims. I was looking at solo queue, and I thought, okay, if there's a meta where Rookie can succeed and kind of do what he did last year, where he can pull this team close to the finish line, but this time I wanted to believe he would, it would be right now. And even now compared to last year, right, the pieces are better. Shoot's performing better than Ning. Lucas is definitely better than Balan and Southwind, and I think has more potential than both of them. And Nani now, I guess we didn't know about Nani before, but the Shy was a player who definitely stepped up in spring as compared to 2020. So to me, IG coming top 4, maybe not likely, but definitely possible. And since I put IG top 4, that meant, hey, one of my top 4 teams would get kicked out of the list. And to me, EDG was the least convincing out of the top teams, where Top Esports have their strong laning style, RNG is the side lane kings, FPX. Honestly, I thought like FPX were the most well-rounded good team. So EDG just kind of got left out as that, the kid who couldn't get picked on the dodgeball team for gym class. So sorry, EDG.
Fair enough. All right, and JDG down in 7th place as well. But we can talk about JDG when we talk about their rearranged power rankings. I'll quickly go through my original ones as well. So similarly, I had FPX in 1st place, RNG in 2nd place. I also had Top Esports in 3rd place because you got to believe in the mojo, right? You got to believe in the mojo. That changed, I will say. WE in 4th place, EDG in 5th place, Suning in 6th, JDG in 7th, IG in 8th, LGD in 9th, BLG in 10th place. So RA not even making it to the top 10. I had them in 11th. And I think the rest are pretty reasonable to not be in the top 10. Maybe there's an argument for LNG, but I think generally speaking that I don't really want to dig too much into the conversation down at the bottom of the table because I feel like we're just going to insult players. So the big logic for me on WE, I think, is the one that sticks out the most, right? WE top 4.
Yep.
I know it's a little out there, guys. I know it's a little eccentric, but coming into the split, what's been the biggest issue historically for WE? It's mid laners, right? When you think, well, I'm not talking like all-time history. I'm talking recent history. Teachmar in the mid lane, who, let's be honest, he had issues, but really, really good on the roams. So they focused on the bottom side, making Jomung the primary carry. The problem with that strategy, Jomung's a little bit coin flippy, it's fair to say. When he's playing well, he's exceptional, but sometimes he'll miss position a little bit, and they lose the game off the back of it in an important team fight. They then went to Shanks, who I think Shanks did fine, but I don't think he was ever going to be a big carry for the team. He was never going to be a player that this team could actually play through. And then suddenly, Mole comes and joins the team. And if anyone can get behind Mole, it's Lyric over here. He's the biggest Mole fan in the world, I think. So I'm like, okay, now we have a mid laner that can be played through. We have a mid laner that we've seen carry games. We've seen be a big playmaker and also a shot caller. So very excited about that mid lane change up. Breathe is looking amazing in the top lane. And I hadn't factored this logic in at the time, but now the meta is shifting away from bot lane being the primary carry, and things like Ezreal that you can just be safe in the laning phase sounds real good because his Jobug doesn't have to be on something like Samira, and he gets to have a little bit more freedom. I'll go more into it when we go to the amended ones, but that was the logic anyway. And same logic as Lyric with EDG not making the top 4 there. Suning, I mean, let's be honest. I just put them too high. I believe a little bit too high.
So Suning was your hopium.
Suning was full hopium in 6th place there. And then I think the rest is fairly reasonable. I think IG in 8th maybe is a little too low, but I think that's more reasonable, than IG 4th, honestly. I think the thing is, with teams like JDG and IG, I had in 7th and 8th. The hard thing is not that I don't think these teams are good. It's just that look how stacked the top 4 is. Like, for me to put WE in top 4, I have to remove a Worlds caliber team. It's that simple. Like, the top few teams in LPL outside of the top 4, like I'd say the top 6 or 7 are seriously Worlds caliber teams. Like, it's very difficult to figure out who you're going to push out of that list. So anyway, that's the base logic on both of our original power rankings. So let's talk through the amended ones and what we changed. So we both kept FPX on the top spot. I think we should just quickly hit on FPX for anyone that didn't really watch much LPL last split, because obviously they weren't at MSI, they didn't win, they were in finals, but they didn't win to RNG. So Lyric, I'll let you go first. What's your logic on putting FPX above RNG since RNG did win the LPL? They went on to win MSI. What is it that sets FPX apart from RNG?
One, I feel like FPX, like overall, were, I'd say, a better team in areas I rate like more highly coming into the split. Like their mid jungle support synergy is absolutely insane. That's the focal point of their strength in my mind and what the team's built on. I mean, we saw what Nuguri did to Xiaohu in the top lane that series, right? And then for Tien and LWX, I figured coming into summer, the mid lane would be the meta, would be a lot better for these players in FPX overall, to where it's like, hey, we are getting a lot of these either safer or more utility-focused champions down in the bottom lane, or even if you are a carry, now maybe you can pair an enchanter up with him to where he will be able to do his job, or heck, maybe give them the Senna Karma to where they could just be the full utility for the top half of the map. I think Tien also does have a lot of carry jungle options coming in, right? The Rumble being a staple now, Viego being up there. We're seeing more teams just pull out things that can either carry the game or have more early game influence, like Lee Sin can be flexed back in certain drafts, Xin Zhao being pulled out. So I feel like the meta opened up for FPX, and it's not like they lost any of the strengths that they had before over RNG, and we did see them, right, convincingly beat RNG in one series. So I definitely think even after playoffs, that wasn't like a hard one team is better than the other. Very close, very strong in different areas, right? Duinby versus Cryin as an example, Xiaohu versus Nuguri, very different kinds of players. So for me, I just had more faith in FPX coming into this split after what we saw in spring and what we knew going into summer.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think FPX I think they're exceptionally versatile is the thing that stands out to me. Like when you look at this roster, you have insane talent in every role. And it has to be said, Crisp and LWX really didn't look good during the finals. Like there were definite issues towards the very end of playoffs for FPX, but I think generally speaking in playoffs, they looked really, really exceptional. And I think definitely at the end of the split, they looked like very much one of the best teams in the league. So I do think that things will be solved. And also with the way that the meta is shifting, again, having that safer bot lane, but also having more freedom in the jungle role. I think Tien being able to play things that have a bit more playmaking potential is definitely a very, very positive thing for FPX. And I think also when he's able to have more individual impact, I feel like that's better for your mental, right? One of the big issues for Tien is that he was feeling a lot of stress, and apparently that was sort of performance based. If he's able to do the things that we've seen him do in the past and have more individual impact, my speculation is maybe that would help. But again,
set mid is meta, Munchables.
That's true.
Set mid is back. I feel like Duinby's probably the best set mid we have in the league. We saw him on Viego. You talked about the Renekton earlier. The Kled can come out. This is a meta where Duinby is extremely happy.
I mean, Cled's going to fit right in, right? We can see plenty of Cled mid this split, that is for sure. Yeah, so RNG in second place. I think that one we can somewhat skip over. I mean, we all saw RNG at MSI. Absolutely dismantling Damn One. Oh, it was beautiful to see. RNG looking fantastic. I think solving a lot of the issues that they had that made people doubt them during playoffs. Obviously, they got absolutely smashed by FPX the first time they met in playoffs. Clearly solving a lot of those issues. Gala looking a lot better. I will say, massive caveat, I don't know why at MSI nobody figured out that Gala's really good at Kai'Sa. You're allowed to pick that away from him or ban it. Those are options.
You know, in that final, they played Kai'Sa Udyr every game.
Yeah.
Every game of the final, they'll play Kai'Sa Udyr.
It's, why were they allowed? I genuinely don't understand. Bit of a weird one. But yeah, I still think that they will be very good. I think that they're going to be very much at the forefront. I think RNG are almost... In fact, are they guaranteed to go to Worlds? Do they qualify from Worlds from MSI? Or is it just that the LPL gets a fourth spot?
No, the LPL gets a fourth spot.
Okay.
That is it. But
okay.
You know, Munch, I feel like it's kind of interesting that the first big change on both of our lists is the exact same team jumping from one place to the same place, right? We both have EDG jumping from fifth back into a top four finish and finishing third now. So, you know, let me take over as host for 1 second and ask you, why'd you put what changed? Why are EDG back on the list? What got them that golden ticket?
Well, I watched some League of Legends recently, Lyric. I watched EDG. They played against BLG. They lost the first game. I was like, oh no. The fall of EDG. BLG are the best team in the world. It's all, everything's changed for summer. And then I realized it was just Senna Karma. They banned Karma. Suddenly, EDG is a good team again. And just finished off BLG very handedly. But also, the series against IG, my goodness. First off, if you haven't seen the series between EDG and IG, pause this podcast, go watch that. It was an absolute banger. I'm gutted that we didn't have 3 games of it because it was so much fun. Very slow early games, but then the team fighting was magnificent. But EDG, they are firing on all cylinders. And I think one of the big things that I've been known to lean towards teams with mojo, right? And EDG has historically not been the most mojo-based team, so I'll generally not lean towards them. But in the late game, these guys really do have mojo. The way they end game number 2 between them and IG, they're like, what was it, 8,000 go down or something, and an Ocean Soul down. Yep. They get this like unbelievable fight. Flandre was popping off as well on the Gwen, and then they just sprint down mid lane. The tier 1 is still available, and in the space of death timers, they destroy, 5 towers and the Nexus and an inhibitor to win the game. It was really, really something to watch. And I think that they've clearly shown in their first 2 series that they are very much a very clean team, a very strategic team. And I think the biggest thing is that they're clearly coming in with set strategies. They clearly know what they want to play. They clearly know how they want to go about approaching this current meta, which is something
they're even learning strategies, right? They took the Senna Karma that you thought was so broken. They took that from BLG.
Exactly. And I feel like there are very few teams that are coming in really knowing quite how they want to play the game. And I feel like EDG, very well prepared, looking exceptional individually, and I just think there's a lot of good things to say about this team. I think it's hard to pinpoint significant weaknesses with this roster. Is the biggest thing that sets them apart.
The things I love about what they did when I moved them back up is, one, we're seeing them diversifying their playstyle, right? It hasn't been all about Viper and Make on the bot lane. They're not just sending JJ down there every chance he can get. They're adapting and realizing, hey, these soul lane pulls are more open. We're going to play more around top and mid. Scout has had exceptional games, throughout his... I think he's played 2 Silas games so far off the top of my head. At least they are the 2 where he completely popped off. In the IG one, he was stealing away Shun's equalizer and having better equalizers than him, taking over the game. Flandre as well. I don't know what it is about Flandre in the early part of the season, but this guy just shows up. Whether it's how he moves in laning phase, shouting for Scout, getting vision, utilizing his TP. We saw him take over the second game against IG, which they realistically should have lost. I really like this look for EDG. I really like that they're utilizing their solo laner strengths on side lane champions as well, which isn't something we got to see at all in Spring Split. I do feel like there are still some issues. There are times where I don't feel like as a team EDG make any like big glaring mistakes. I feel like EDG make most of their mistakes in those transitionary windows. Like, let's say they just take Dragon. You're now on that 5-minute window where you're pretty much just ping-ponging waves back and forth. That's when it'll be like, okay, Scout overextends in a side lane and dies, or JJ walks into the enemy jungle alone trying to get vision and gets picked off. And these are the windows where EDG will really give over chances for the enemy team to, find a big objective win or turn that into something like a Baron or so forth. So still some small issues to where I don't feel like they're going to win the split as of now, but definitely a team that, again, I took them out of my top 4 and now moving them back up to top 3, it just made sense.
Yeah, I definitely think they've earned their spot in the top 4. That honestly,
they earned their spot
when
in
I
our
didn't
hearts,
put them
which
in
they
the
never
top
should have
4,
lost.
Like at the start of the split, I was doing a power rankings and I was like, look, who am I going to remove? It's the top 4 in my mind was very clear: FPX, RNG, Top Esports, and EDG. But I wanted to put WE in, so I was like, well, which one goes? It's that kind of situation.
That's how I felt about IG. Rookie had to take someone's spot. It just who's And going back to the Mojo point, right? If anyone's just going to tune into this for the first time for some reason and never heard us talk about Mojo, right? When we say Mojo, we really mean like that wow factor, that ability to like outplay or come in clutch or make that sick individual outplay. Things that, top esports are very well known for, even players on FPX, even, right, Rookie in the Shy. So EDG didn't really hit those Mojo bars in mine and Munchables books, but hey, in those first 2 games, the Mojo levels are off the chart, Munchables, and EDG are once again going to Worlds, even though me and you don't decide that at all. We were actually just idiots, but we have corrected our ways.
I think we should decide that, though. I think that could be a better system. Well, I'll have a word with whoever runs. Well, me and TJ will have some words. Let's talk about the number 4 spot here, because we've both got a different squad. You've got Top Esports. I've removed Top Esports from my top 4. They're in 5th place now, which sounds very not like Munchables. I know I've been a little Top Esports biased in the past. I've still got WE there. I didn't move WE. I still believe that squad can do it. Why do you keep Top Esports there with how badly it started for Top Esports? I didn't see any mojo. I didn't feel any mojo. All I saw was Knight being an absolute monster in the mid lane, while the rest... Honestly, Top Esports versus JDG felt like watching an IG series in 2020. Because you had a mid laner that was just going mental, desperately trying to win the game, while everything fell apart around him. Like, what's the logic on keeping them in the top 4?
So first of all, I guess I won't go too in depth on it, right? But I mean, reality hit me in terms of IG, because I had IG in that spot before. We saw IG, how they performed, and I still think IG will be a top team. I have them in 6th, but realistically, I think top 4 for them will be a bit of an overperformance. And then to me, the decision came down between Top Esports and the team they lost to, JDG. And when I was doing this amended power ranking, when we talked about doing this segment, I thought to myself, okay, right, I feel, will it be too much of an overreaction to move Top Esports down further? Because if we would have done the same thing last split, right, Top Esports lost to Rogue Warriors in week 1.
Yeah.
Like, the same thing could have happened where I'd be like, okay, Top Esports now a 10th place team, but Top Esports are the team that, even if they do lose certain series, even in this fashion, right? Because Top Esports are a team that will stomp you or be stomped typically, because they don't really... They aren't a team that shows too many slow games where they're willing to turtle and fight back in, though. In game 1, they did attempt to do that, but still, I just have a lot of belief in the level of talent on Top Esports roster. LPL will always be a league where having this much star power, and honestly, actually probably any league in the world, if you had as much star power as Top Esports, it would be able to carry you far. That I think they can do it right. We saw Chingtian debut for Top Esports. He didn't have a good series. We already hit on Jackie Love earlier in the episode, but they can always default back to 369 if need be. And we've already talked about how this meta seems like it's a lot more topside oriented in the early game. And 369 played every lane matchup like he's supposed to win it anyway. So if the meta is actually based around you're able to do that because your jungle and mid laner are going to be playing up towards your lane, it seems like, hey, they can keep giving Xingtian more time, more experience, play him on stage. But if things fall through, right, they can always default back to 369 if need be. I don't expect Jackie Love to perform like this every series, right? We've seen the caliber of player he is. So overall, I think if I move top esports lower, I would feel like I was overreacting too much to one series.
Yeah, I unfortunately, I feel like I had to find the team that was the most reasonable
to justify WE
so that I could have WE in top 4. I genuinely do believe in WE. It's not just pure bias. Like, I genuinely think that this team has some real talent. I'm like praying that we get to see Breathe on a roster that can compete in top 4, that can make it to the World Championship. I would love to see Breathe individually versus some of the international.
This one definitely can.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really hoping it does work out. I'm hoping that Jomon can play these safe AD carries, and if the bot lane can be in a meta that is a little bit safer, that you can play very passively during the laning phase, and it can be focused on the top side. I fully like Bei Sheng is a monster, man. Bei Sheng is so, I'm not allowed to swear, so really good at League of Legends, and with Breathe in the top lane and Mole in the mid lane, like, come on. You can't tell me that you don't believe that could be a Worlds caliber team. Like, I can just see this beautiful vision of what this team can be.
Munchables, if there's anyone who wants to believe that a team with Mole on it is going to be a world caliber team, it's me, right? I said in spring, this is Year of the Mole. I said that they were going to win so much that Year of the Mole was going to be added to the Zodiac calendar officially. So my thing with this team is it's not even about them, right? Because I feel like from what we've seen in the 2 series they've played, that their bot lane has looked good. Elk especially, once again, for people who don't know, Jomon has performed exceptionally well, looked good in the laning phase, playing well in team fights overall. It's reminding of that thing that sparked you towards the end of 2020 spring and the beginning of 2020 summer, where it's like, hey, this guy's having those really big pop-off moments and can be relied on, even though WE aren't playing around him. WE are playing up towards that top side. So I feel like the only big question mark with WE is how they fit in Mole, because we've seen it isn't there yet.
Yeah.
Mole had one really bad game on set. I think people can argue he also had a bad Twisted Fate game today, but I think that was a lot more to how WE as a whole set up the map rather than just Mole playing incorrectly himself. But there's definitely going to be some growing pains there. Mole's style, I think, is a lot different than either Shanks or Teacher Maz before, so
for sure.
It's going to take some time. I think they definitely could hit that top 4, right? You said it earlier. I think anyone realistically in the top 7 of my list, I wouldn't be surprised if it interchanged a little bit. But for me, just like, hey, JDG and Top Esports, I think the quality of their rosters and their teams are too good. And then I have IG over them because, hey, if there's, no matter how much I love Mole, if there's one player that I think has a higher ceiling than Mole, it's definitely Rookie. I mean, Rookie single-handedly carries IG to 6 in my power ranking. Single-handedly. It's just, and again, the other players are good. I mean, Shroon's good. I think Lucas will improve, but Rookie's Rookie.
At the end of the day, you already know I agree with you. Back in 2020 summer regional tournament, I predicted that not IG would beat LGD. I predicted that specifically Rookie would beat LGD. They had a little picture of Rookie on the predictions graphic. So I think IG, there's always potential that they could make top 4, but I just think the state that they're in right now, I don't think it's happening. I think JDG is the team on my power rankings. I've got them in 6th on my amended one. That's the team that I want them to prove me wrong. I want this team to be 2020 Spring JDG again. Like, I'm totally okay with Loken being on the roster. I'm one of the few people that isn't, like, screaming for Mystic to... I think my Mystic is having visa issues right now or something along those lines. I'm not entirely sure. But even if Mystic plays, that's fantastic. But I think that, like I said earlier, Yagao was my favorite for this week. I think he's looking amazing. I think Zoom is just an absolute beast. Obviously, Kanavi's fantastic. So I think that when you look at this, again, the amount of star power on this roster, if Yagao can level up in the way that he did against Top Esports, if that's the level of play we can see consistently, I'll regret not putting them in the top 4, honestly. But I just don't know whether that's going to happen consistently.
JDG are the one team that I look at my power ranking. I have them in 5th now. That I feel like I did dirty. I feel like I did them dirty by putting them in 5th, right? After their 2-2-0s, right? Where I guess game 2 against TT was close, but Kanavi has carry champions in the jungle, so he's popping off once again. You're seeing early ganks around top lane with Zoom. Zoom champions are back in the meta. The set is the one that you've been highlighting, Munchables. Wukong's back. He's been able to pull out the Ornn and survive the onslaught of the composition that Top Esports pulled out. It just feels like JDG are positioned really very well right now going forward, but I don't know. After seeing how JDG played last split, especially around how they would set up a lot of their objectives. And they were a team that really did rely on invading the enemy jungle, getting deep wards, and then using that to find picks to turn that into anything significant in the end. That, like, I'm going to need to see more from JDG before I personally would think they can go higher. But JDG and Top Esports were definitely a dicey one for me. I didn't really know who should come in 4th. Ultimately, overall, I just relied on the fact that, hey, again, kind of pound for pound, Top Esports or Top Esports.
Yeah. I think if I have like my power rankings are always a little bit based on hope, right? If I had a super realistic power rankings of the most likely way that this all pans out, I would actually change JDG to 4th, W to 5th, Top Esports to 6th. But based on like potential, which I'm definitely one that leans in towards the potential of the mojo, I'm sticking with the way I've amended it. I do want to quit. We're starting to run out of time here, Lyric, but I do want to just mention a couple of the teams towards the lower end of things and the differences between mine and your power rankings. We both have Suning fairly low. I think that's relatively self-explanatory. You have RA and LNG in the top 10. I have UP and BLG in the top 10. So let's just very quickly hit on that because we are running short on time. But for me, UP, as you mentioned before, actually a very surprisingly pleasant performance. Yes, they haven't got a win yet, but it's going to happen. I feel like the pieces just need a little bit of time to ruminate, to start to work together. I think this is a team that has a decent amount of individual talent, and I think that once they start to get that working together, SMLZ especially really pleasantly surprised me in their games. And I think BLG, I considered moving them out of top 10, but I still believe in I think PP God will pick up again over the course of the split, and he'll start to look a bit better, and I think they'll be a decent team. Over to you, mate. Do you want to talk about RA quickly?
Yeah, for me, RA, whenever I evaluate a lot of teams, I think one thing listeners and viewers can get from this is that I put a lot of stock into individual level of talent, and RA just has that. RA has that, in my opinion, more than teams like BLG, LGD, UP, really any team under them, even Suiting at this point. Cube's playing well. I think Fofo's exceptional. Le Yen is being set up for success. Hung and iBoy are being more facilitators right now. And even in their games you watch, it's a lot more about kind of individual outplays helping them cement wins like they did up against, I believe it was LGD, where Fofo's on the Viego, finds a bunch of resets and gets them back in the game for that win. So RA overall, I think, are solid across the board in terms of like macro, team fighting players. It's just, I don't expect them to punch above their weight because they aren't overperformers in any of those areas. For LNG, I think once again they default to this spot by the fact that I think they are just kind of gatekeepers in the sense that they do have a solid level of team play coming out. They do have some strong pieces. Tarzan's playing well. They actually already took a series off BLG. They have Ale back up in the top side, and they're playing around his like more, I don't want to say coin flippy, but more like dynamic, versatile, fragile, crazy laning phases that he's able to pull out. And even Icon has been able to find in early split impact. So for me, LNG just kind of looks better than the rest right now. LGD would be the team on the cusp for me that could do it just because Shadow has been playing like an absolute madman. But the rest of the players on that team,
yeah, I'm so excited for Shadow. I have no faith in Kramer whatsoever, I'm afraid. I believed in him before, never again. I don't know. That team, I don't think they're going to be topping any tables, but Shadow, hey, he's looking amazing. I got them in 11th. And I know it sounds really dumb for me to have BLG way higher than LNG. LNG I've got in 13th place. And BLG I've got in 10th. It's like, obviously LNG just beat them, but I mean, it doesn't matter about that. BLG did look like the better
team in that series, to be fair. BLG did look better, in my opinion, in that series. They just weren't the team that won, right? They just had more of those mid-late game mistakes, which happens. Sometimes the better team does lose.
Let's be honest, like EDG versus IG, I feel like in the second game, IG were the better team, but EDG won the team fight. They won the game. With that, though, we are running out of time here, Lyric. So we're going to round up. Any final thoughts as we go towards week number 2 on just anything? The floor is yours, my friend.
I just want to say I'm extremely sad that I have WE in 7th, and the more I look at it, the more depressed I am. I'm also sad and waiting for Mole to pop off. WE fans, Mole fans of the world out there, be patient. Don't jump the gun. Don't overreact. This man will show up soon.
We're gonna have to make some t-shirts. We're gonna have to make Year of the Mole t-shirts. We'll have to see how WE do. That's gonna be episode 1 done and dusted. Make sure you tune in next week. Make sure you're tuning into the LPL. We're on 7 days a week, so make sure you're watching because it's the best league in the world. I've been Munchables. I've been joined by Lyric, and we'll see you guys in Champ Select.